Hello. Good morning.
Hi, Larly. I see your message. This is Darcy. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, great. Alrighty. Then we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, and thank you for attending this stakeholder meeting for the Office of Acupuncture Licensure via webinar. Today is July 12th, 2022, and the time is 10 a.m. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm a regulatory analyst with the division. Also attending is Karen McGovern, Deputy Division Director of Legal Affairs, and Zen Mayhew, Program Director, and Elena Kemp, Regulatory Coordinator. Due to concerns regarding COVID-19, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual, and we appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. The purpose of this stakeholder meeting is to discuss the proposed revisions to Rule 1.2 to implement Colorado Senate Bill 22116 concerning the ability of an individual to obtain an occupational credential through the Occupational Credential Portability Program, and identify what rule changes should be considered to implement Colorado House Bill 221263 concerning the continuation of licensing requirements for acupuncturists. And we'll go more into those in a minute once we go through this initial introduction. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the program's website by the close of business tomorrow. As this stakeholder meeting is held solely by webinar, please raise your hand using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you'll be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comment in the question section and we will read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, we ask when you do provide comments that you state your name and the name of the organization you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 to 5 minutes and try not to repeat something that was already said, which shouldn't be a problem today. But if you're in agreement with someone else, we appreciate if you let us know that as well. If you're using audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. So talking about the overview of today's meeting, so we'll go into a little bit of detail as to why we are here. We already mentioned it's for legislative implementation, the 2 bills that are up for consideration for potential rulemaking for the director. Those bills are Senate Bill 22116. I won't read the title because it's showing right there, and House Bill 221263, which was the sunset for acupuncturists. And then we'll ask for specific feedback regarding the proposed changes on the rules. Some we've already drafted for Senate Bill 22116, and for House Bill 221263, we're just going to be asking questions based on the legislation to get feedback from stakeholders. So looking at the Zoom platform, hopefully you're familiar with it. If you're not, you can use, there are the functions at the bottom. There's an image there that's just a general image of what Zoom looks like. So you can either raise your hand when it's time for feedback and we can unmute your line so everyone can hear it, or you can use the Q&A function or the chat function on your toolbar, and we can read your comments out loud for the recording to make sure that stakeholders can hear them, and also to make sure that the director gets those comments as well. And then from here, we'll go into this later as well too, but you're always welcome to submit written feedback to the email address that's posted here. It's dora_dpo_rulemaking@state.co.us. The rulemaking hearing right now is tentatively scheduled for August 30th, 2022 at 10 a.m. And I'm reading this only because I think this is important for people to have in case anyone's participating only by phone and can't see the screen. And then as a reminder, you can always look for rulemaking updates on the program's website. So you can navigate there under healthcare professions, acupuncture, and then everything about rulemaking will be housed in a few places, but the easiest way to access it is under the public notices tab. That's where we post the notices for stakeholder meetings, rulemaking hearings, and then any updates to those. So that's also where the recording from this meeting will be posted. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so we'll go through, before we take comments, we'll go through the legislative changes. We'll discuss the mandatory and authorized rulemaking that is set forth in those bills that were passed this legislative session. We'll ask for stakeholders to weigh in and provide feedback, and then we'll answer any questions and discuss next steps. So the first bill that was passed was changes to the Occupational Credential Portability Program that was passed a couple of years ago. And so you can see, I won't read through everything here, but they were pretty minor changes, but did require some slight modifications to the rule that currently exists in order to align the rule with the legislation. So the Occupational Credential Portability Program allows people who are licensed in another state to get licensed here. It used to be known as licensure by endorsement. So some of you may be familiar with that. If an individual has substantially equivalent education or experience in another state. And it also helps folks that are in the military, if they have a specialty that's consistent with or substantially equivalent to a license here. So in this case, an acupuncturist, then it would give them a pathway to get licensed in Colorado. You can go to the next slide, Elena. So we'll pause here. This is just a screenshot of the proposed changes to the rules, or this rule 1.2 licensure by endorsement, based on Senate Bill 22116. I'm going to check see if anyone has a raised hand or would like to provide feedback. And we only have 2 people who are participating live with us today. So if you don't have any feedback, you can let us know that as well, and then we can move on. We can also come back. Awesome. Okay. We can also come back to if anyone wants to provide feedback regarding these proposed changes. Okay, great. So I think we're okay there, Elena. I think we can move on. Okay. So this is a little bit bigger as far as legislative implementation is concerned. So as far as this is the sunset for acupuncturists from this legislative session, as far as rulemaking is concerned, This legislation allows an acupuncturist to supervise an unlicensed acupuncture aide in the performance of specific tasks as determined by rule of the director, and directing the director to adopt rules specifying the tasks that may be performed by an acupuncture aide, the training and supervision required, and the number of acupuncture aides that an acupuncturist may supervise. So that is a mandate that the director does have to promulgate rules regarding the supervision of acupuncturist aides. So we'll get into that later down in the slides when we ask for feedback. The second thing is authorizing the director to adopt rules to establish the appropriate use of telehealth to provide acupuncture services. So this is discretionary for the director to promulgate rules surrounding telehealth. And we definitely want to hear from you, stakeholders, about whether you think rules are necessary, and if you think the rules are necessary, what you think should be included in those rules. And then the third piece is authorizing the director to adopt rules to implement the requirement of each acupuncturist to devise a plan for the safe storage, security, and disposal of patient records. So again, this is discretionary for the director to adopt new rules to implement this piece of the legislation. And we'll want to hear from you about, do you think rules are necessary? And if you do think they're necessary, what should be included in them to implement this legislation? The next one right now. And just other statutory changes that came out of this legislation, or out of the sunset. That's wrong, the date. It shouldn't be 2023, it's 2033. It's continued for 11 years, allowing the director to impose a fine on a licensee for unprofessional conduct, requiring final actions of the director to be appealed directly to the Court of Appeals, modernizing the definition of acupuncturist. I wanted to just make sure, there's a disclaimer here, I only included a couple of the big modifications to definitions, so I suggest you look at the bill to look at all of the modifications to the definitions, because there were multiple and they're not all listed here. Updating the term Oriental in references to the methods and concepts of acupuncture with more modern terminology, and that was carried throughout the entire Practice Act. Requiring each applicant for acupuncturist licensure to pass an examination approved by the director. Updating unlawful acts as it relates to title protection. Updating the grounds for discipline of an acupuncturist relating to the use or abuse of alcohol, drugs, or controlled substances to align with other regulated professions, and adding grounds for discipline if someone fails to respond to a complaint filed, like a licensee fails to respond to a complaint. So here's where we would like to hear from you with respect to acupuncture aides. And these are the questions that we need answered in order to be able to draft the rules to comply with the legislative mandate that the director make rules. So if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand, and we can, awesome, I see two raised hands. So I will, Laura Lee Hollinghorst, you're the first person I see. So I've unmuted you. We should be able to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's always good news on these things. Thank you guys for everything. So Stacy, who's on the line, she's a practitioner, and she's also our board vice chair. So she understands, she's going to be one who really pipes in on this here. But I also just wanted to get a sense of, since we're the only two people on this call today, I know our board president and some others could not make it today because they work during the day. What is the best way to get information to you? Is it this rulemaking email? And also, what would be the timeline for them to get information to you outside of this call?
Great question. So yes, please submit it to the rulemaking inbox, which is Adora_DPO_rulemaking at state.co.us. And then we ask for it sooner rather than later, just because a couple things. We want to be able to post the comments on the website for other stakeholders to be able to weigh in and provide additional comments. And then from here, we're going to determine, based on the comments received, whether another stakeholder meeting is warranted or necessary. So that will help us determine that. So there's no set deadline. You can always provide comments up until the hearing where you can testify at the hearing, which I know you know, Laura Lee,
Sure.
you're well experienced in this, but sooner the better.
Right. Well, and again, when you say hearing, you mean if we decide after this to, or after you get comments that we even need one, correct?
We absolutely, by statute, we have to have a hearing.
Oh, so there will be, yeah, because I thought this was, when I saw the thing on this, I thought, okay, this is just about SB 116. And then I saw it was not. And I thought, oh, I guess we're doing the hearing now. So you're telling me this is not that. So pardon
This is not the hearing. This is the stakeholder meeting before we even file the draft rules with the Secretary of State and provide the statutory notice that's required.
Oh, phew. Okay, I apologize. I did not read that.
That's fine.
Enough. Summer brain. I get it now. It should have made sense.
No, you have time for sure.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, that's it. That was then what I needed to know. And I'm sure what Stacy also, one of the things she would want. So that's my 2 C's. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then I will get to Miss Stacy Donaldson.
All right.
We should. Oops, I think I muted you. There we go. We should be able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I will try to answer these questions as best as I can. The only one I want to go back to my board and to my colleagues about is the last one. The first one, specified tasks may be performed by an acupuncture aide under the supervision. That would include like cupping, being able to take, oh God, the word just escaped my memory, like blood pressure and pulse, and there's a specific word that defines all of that. But
vital signs.
Thank you. The vital signs, and then pulling needles. The main thing we're having the challenge with is that right now only a licensed acupuncturist may insert and remove needles. And what we're needing help with is the removing of needles, because that really is not a task that requires safety requirements, but not like actual skill and knowledge requirements. And that would allow us to treat more people within an hour, because we don't have to keep coming back into the room to pull needles. So the most important task is to be able to remove needles. And then the manual therapies like cupping, gua sha, also known as Graston technique, any type of manual like acupressure stuff that we show that, the aid how to do. And then possibly monitoring Moxa. And that's the one that I would want to have a conversation with my colleagues and also with Dora. Because out of all of those, Moxa is it's when we're burning an herb on a patient, and it's the one that requires somebody to be in the room at all times. And again, it's more of a safety thing than a skill thing. So those are the main things, is just the manual therapies that are more safety and not necessarily require a whole lot of skill and knowledge of the medicine. The task they should be prohibited from doing is absolutely needling. They are not allowed to insert a needle at all. They're not allowed to do anything that actually they're allowed to assist with us helping implement a treatment plan, but they are absolutely not allowed to do anything that would be viewed as being treatment on their own without our direction.
Okay.
Training and supervision, definitely clean needle technique, first aid, and then the safety classes about like gua sha, cupping, Moxa, so that they understand like the safety procedures around all of that. That would probably, I know the first two are standard and that they're easily implemented. I would say we'll probably need to create a certification, something like that, for the gua sha, cupping, and Moxa, just because they might exist. I don't know. I haven't looked for that, but those would be the requirement to training. And also like in the removing of needles, how to like count to remove the needles, and how to make sure all the needles are removed, and then the clean needle technique about what to do when you're removing needles. How many,
Okay.
and my thing about how many aides, I don't want to limit us, but I also don't want it to make it outrageous. My initial gut reaction on that is 3, which I think is plenty, but I would want to go back to my colleagues and my board and see if there's any foreseeable need that they might want to have more than that. But I would think 3 per licensed acupuncturist. And that's a lot, but I'm trying to make sure that I don't limit my colleagues.
Okay. Yeah, and it's definitely, I mean, I think that's great that you're going to be talking to other licensees and getting feedback, because that's the purpose of this. So we understand that you're saying I don't want to be locked into this. But yeah, that's what's most helpful for the directors to hear from as many people who are in the practice as possible.
Yeah.
And then Alina, I think I appreciate you taking the notes down there. You have prenatal techniques. I think it's supposed to be clean needle techniques. And then she also said first aid as well.
Yeah.
And we do have this recorded so we can go back, but I just want to make sure it's as correct as possible for.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Once we get those notes cleaned up a little bit there at the bottom, then we can go to the next screen. I imagine you'll have feedback on the telehealth as well. And you can delete prenatal, Elena. It's not prenatal. It's just clean needle.
Yeah, clean needle. Sorry, I'm not very clear with my speaking. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So yeah, the telehealth is more like, because under acupuncture services is dietary and herbal recommendations, and then being able to recommend acupressure techniques. And so especially with COVID, many of us transitioned to supporting our patients via telehealth, obviously without the insertion of needles. And so it's using the other branches of our medicine in a much more effective way, and also being able to bill insurance for that. So, if I have somebody who has COVID and I'm working with them to support them with, vitamin and supplement and herbal ability via telehealth, being able, and acupressure, like showing them massage techniques and acupressure techniques, that I'm able to do that legally and under the scope of my practice.
Okay.
Because obviously I'm not going to be telling them how to insert a needle over the phone, but it's the other avenues of our practice. Yeah.
Okay. And so I assume when you submit the written comments, that you can go into more specifics about that and how you think that should be incorporated by rule. But it does sound like you're saying that we do need to have rules related to telehealth.
Yeah, because we've been doing a lot, especially during the pandemic, and it's a gray area right now. And so we just want to make sure that our patients are safe, and the definitions are clearly defined on what we can and cannot do via telehealth.
Okay. And Laura Lee, I know you're deferring, but if you want to add anything too, feel free to just jump in. If you can unmute yourself. So.
Yeah, so am I still unmuted?
No, we can't hear you, but you have the controls too. I haven't put you back on mute, but so since there are only the two of you, if you want to go back and forth and chime in, feel free. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to raise your hand again.
Oh, okay. No, I just realized I should probably mute so you don't have to listen to me take notes. Okay. Yeah, I will. No, honestly, I think this makes sense. I guess one question on the last is, do you need us to be, when you say just be specific, I'm assuming you need us to do sort of a list of services, what is or isn't, but also where we get into conversations with our insurance company about what we can and can't bill. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, and when I say be specific, sometimes it's helpful for us to see like the language that you would like, the verbatim language that you would like to see in the rule. As far as like the acupuncture aids and what they may or may not do, understanding that there might be creating a laundry list sometimes is helpful and sometimes it's not, right? Because then you can limit based on that if you're not fully inclusive. So all of that will be up for the director to consider, but give us everything that you want to see in the rules so that we can run it through other stakeholders as well. So that's why I was saying that the more specific you can be, the more helpful it is for the director and for us during this process. Because I think that with this legislation and these changes, it's a pretty wide slate, right, that the director can make rules on. And so it's helpful for us to hear from you, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I'm just going to say it back to you, so I'm sure to make sure that my sense and your sense are aligning.
Yeah.
That what would be helpful, rather than reviewing what the director thinks first, is really to provide you with the language that we would prefer to see, and then have the director take a look at that and advise us on feelings from Dora going into that. Does that make? Did I just make any sense?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yes, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. That is a good clarification. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Elena, I think we can move on to the last, and that's the storage, security, and disposal of patient records. Any thoughts on that? And we included in here a link to the current medical board policy as a sample of what another board does via policy. So that can be helpful, or you can say you don't like it at all and and can mark it up. So that's why we included that here.
Yeah, let me take this as the last one that I don't know a whole lot about. So let me take the example that you provided and then take it back to the board and to our colleagues and see if there's anything. I think the reason we added this in was to actually make us have a policy that was uniform across the profession. And so let me see the example that you've given and go back to the board and our colleagues and see if it's adequate or if there's anything we need to modify specifically for our profession. But I think this is one of the things we were trying to help our profession become a little bit more professional in, is having a written policy that we all have to follow that's uniform across the profession. So I don't have any concrete feedback for you at the moment, but I will make sure that we get that back to you before the next meeting.
Okay, that's great. So Elena's showing the policy there. I don't know when we post this on the website, I don't think you'll be able to click on that link. But if you have a hard time locating it, you can reach out to us and we can send you the link. And then it's also on the medical board's website and the policy number is there too.
Yeah, I think it's possible for you guys to maybe even put that link in the chat or send it over. Anything that can.
Yeah, we can put it.
You guys.
Yeah, because that would be helpful.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you mind dropping that link in the chat, Elena? And then they'll have that. That's a good idea. Because I cropped it out so you didn't have to look at all of the policies. They have quite a few.
Yeah, and I'm curious, my one question to you guys is, do you know if they have anything in here, I can look through and read it, on electronic records?
That's a good question. I'm not seeing it at first glance while we're looking at it, but that's
I'll look through and look, because I know that's one thing, because so many of us are working with insurance now. We have to have electronic records and record keeping, and just trying to figure out how to make that uniform across the profession too. So we'll work on this and then we'll get it back to you before, shortly.
Okay, great. All right, then I think we can go back to the slides, Elena, and we can wrap up. So next steps, we want to continue to receive feedback and draft the proposed rules, which those will then become the notice of permanent rulemaking that gets filed with the Secretary of State's office. We'll determine whether we need to schedule another stakeholder meeting to receive additional feedback based on the comments that we receive. And then the permanent rulemaking hearing is tentatively scheduled for August 30th, 2022. I have permanent in here. I think that the director needs to decide as well if emergency rulemaking will be necessary at that time in order to meet the effective date of the legislation. So I don't want any surprises. I think that that will likely need to be permanent and emergency in order to meet the effective date of the legislation. So heads up there.
Thank you. That's important clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, because at this point in time, it's hard once the bills get signed, and it's challenging to get the rules in effect with all the different deadlines and timelines. Any other questions?
Is there anything else you need from us, or just clarification on those specific areas?
I think clarification on those areas, and if there's anything that you think we missed, feel free to let us know, because that's what this is all about. So,
alrighty, I have my notes.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you guys so
Well,
much.
thank you both for being
If you
here.
could just put that link in the chat before you sign us off, that would be super handy. Or if you can just email it. I think you guys have my deets, but I can put my email in here too if that's helpful.
Elena dropped it in, Laura Lee, so hopefully you can see it. We'll wait here for a minute or two so you can confirm that you received it.
I'm not seeing anything.
Oh, it's only to hosts and panelists. Will you drop it to everyone, Elena?
Oh, yeah.
Yay! Thank you.
Genius. Okay, I have it copied. Thank you.
Yep, me too.
All righty. We'll
Alrighty.
take care, and we're going to go ahead and disconnect.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.